This is essentially where the aspiring entrepreneurs get to put their management skills in use. So as CEOs of these acquired businesses, they will be driving value creation activities, increasing operational efficiency.
One would think that it's always good to buy sort of a highly valued and high growing companies and be the CEO and owner of a unicorn or highly scaled technology value or software as a service. However, this is not what the program is about. The sweet spot of acquiring companies is more in the boring end of things. So you want to have a company which is relatively inexpensive in addition to these potential black swan effects of the market in general.
Hello, this is Sami Miettinen. I run this channel called Neuvottelija or Negotiator, and in this episode I show how to negotiate an acquisition in a True North program, Entrepreneurship through Acquisition. My hosts are Gautam Basu and Mikko Järvinen, who will first explain the ETA concept, and then I will demonstrate how negotiations can be used to acquire a company at reasonable price, especially taking advantage of the changed circumstances in the current COVID-19 market. I will go through a couple of basics in negotiation, first showing how valuation and relative price work and how a weak negotiation arc is formed. Then I will go through a couple of information gathering tactics and how to signal in negotiations. This will be later on followed up with the rest of the training where people have the opportunity to ask me questions on negotiations. If you are listening to this podcast, I would strongly recommend you watch also the YouTube version of it because of the slide I will be using throughout.
Welcome to the first ever True North Search webinar. My name is Gautam Basu and I'm the managing partner at True North Search. We originally planned to hold this event at the Aalto Business School, but due to the COVID-19 situation, we decided to leverage the principles of agility and adaptability in business operations, and we quickly adapted to the remote online format, which I think many of you have already started doing. With that being said, I don't think this will detract from the value we'll get today, because we have an exciting presentation by Mr. Sami Miettinen from TransLink Corporate Finance on the topic of negotiation for acquisition entrepreneurs. Negotiation is one of the key skills to develop if one wants to be successful in entrepreneurship through acquisition. From negotiating a transitional service agreement with the seller to negotiating the final purchase price of a transaction, the art and skill of negotiation is a core competency for this career path. So we're thrilled to have Sami present for us this evening. But before we dive into this exciting presentation, a couple of ground rules. So number one, everyone on this call, please mute yourselves so we minimize all background noise. And number two is if you have a question for the presenter, then please use the chat function in Zoom to ask your question. And I will monitor the chat area during the presentation, and then we can ask the presenter in a timely manner. With that being said, I'd like to turn it over to my associate, Mikko Järvinen, who will give us a quick review of the ETA model for those of you that may not be familiar with that. And once he's completed, then we'll turn it over to Sami. So Mikko, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gautam. Just a moment, I will be sharing my screen for you, and I think I have now accomplished that successfully. You see my screen, right?
Yep.
Excellent. Good. So for you that are first time attending these our events in general, or are new to the entrepreneurship through acquisition model, I have just a couple of slides to actually explain what all this is about. So essentially, entrepreneurship through acquisition isn't something very new. Businesses have been traded probably for as long as there has been people around. But this specific approach, this specific model of entrepreneurship through acquisition has originally been developed in US by a gentleman called Irv Grousbeck in the Stanford University in mid-80s. Essentially, we see it as a career path where an aspiring entrepreneur can search for, acquire, lead, operate, and grow an existing business. So essentially an alternative to your startup path where businesses are created from basically zero. Maybe the one key aspect of ETA model is the three main principles it has. So essentially there are the jockey, the horse, and the trainer. Jockey being the aspiring entrepreneur, starting the search to acquire an established target business. The horse being an established business that is acquired. And the trainer, that can be an investor, advisor, or an accelerator that is supporting the jockey on the journey. Traditionally, the jockeys have been freshly graduated MBAs, but more recently we have seen people, more experienced people taking this role. Typically people with a long management experience and maybe looking for an alternative to the corporate life. The horses are typically companies that have already existing revenues, cash flow, customer, suppliers. So something very different to your startup world. And the trainer can be an investor, advisor, or in the case of True North Search, an accelerator, which is there to actually support the jockey in order to find the suitable horse and have what we would call a good jockey horse fit to move on, develop, grow that business. I'll also show the 4 key steps of the ETA process. So as you can see the timeline on the top row, the whole duration for this ETA process is estimated to be something in between 5 years to 10 years. And to get this started, there are actually 3 main variations. There is the search fund variation, where aspiring entrepreneur essentially raises funding for the search and acquire stage. So essentially project funding for the duration of 12 to 8 months to search and find an ideal target. Second option is the self-funded search, where the searcher covers those costs out of his or her pocket. And thirdly, there is the option of partnering up with the accelerator, which can essentially help on some of the resources that are needed for this stage. The search and acquire stage, that is something very, I would say, unique for the entrepreneurship through acquisition process. So what the searcher will do in this stage is that he or she will screen around 500 potential targets, meet sellers, conduct due diligence, arrange finance, negotiating a purchase, and acquires only one target out of those 500 potential ones. And the fourth stage, operate and grow. This is essentially where the aspiring entrepreneurs get to put their management skills in use. So as CEOs of these acquired businesses, they will be driving value creation activities, increasing operational efficiency, and growing the revenue of the business. And finally, there is the exit stage. Typically, some type of liquidity event happens in 4 to 7 years from the acquisition. And there are essentially 2 paths that can happen. The company can be acquired by a third party, or if the entrepreneur decides, he can choose the path of recapitalization, where he essentially buys the investors out at this stage and may continue running the business for the rest of his life, if that is what the entrepreneur is actually looking for. So I guess this sums up pretty much the 4 steps of the ETA process. And I guess if you have some questions, please put them on the chat, and maybe we'll come back to that at the latter part of the presentation. But having said this, I think I would be happy to hand over the presentation back to Sami.
Sami, the floor is yours.
Okay. So will you put the share Okay.
Here we go.
Now, okay, shares presentation. There we go.
Yep, that works.
Very good. Thanks for inviting me here. So I'm doing this pro bono, and my background is I'm an investment banker. I spent half of my career in London, 13 years, in Credit Suisse and SEB and the Pöyry Capital. And then I have worked in the investment banking and corporate finance in Finland in various institutions. Then as a sort of side step, I have been the CEO of a Nordic trustee, which manages the bondholders' rights in the Finnish bond structures. I have graduated from Aalto and have an MBA from USA. And why I'm here talking about the negotiations is because I have, together with Juhana Torkki, published the book Uusi neuvotteluvalta, which is because it's quite a short, small market. It's the market leader in the negotiation literature in Finland. And here are my contact details if you want to reach me out. So I was asked to discuss a couple of key concepts in negotiation and how they tie up to this ETA model of acquiring a business and becoming the CEO. First of all, my day job is I'm a corporate financier, and TransLink Corporate Finance does mostly sell-side M&A businesses, so we would typically be on the selling side of whereas the participants in this ETA program would be buying. But from time to time we do buy-side advisory, so I know the process and how the financing ties to it. So those are the two areas of investment banking services which are relevant to the ETA program, the buy-side M&A advisory and financing advisory. And if you go on to how those two services apply to the ETA, first we have to look at the outside environment, and that's of course pretty grim. So this is a timeline of the fear index of VIX, and this measures the implied volatility of the options in the Chicago Board of Options, and we have passed the previous all-time high peak at 2008 when the Lehman Brothers collapsed. So this is a similar magnitude event we are witnessing with COVID-19. And that's of course pretty bad news for most of the humanity, but this could actually be a pretty good model, point in time to look at this ETA model, because asset valuations are down, and at some point they will obviously go up. So it's a good point to start. And if you look at the valuation in general, one would think that it's always good to buy sort of a highly valued and high growing companies and be the CEO and owner of a unicorn or highly scaled technology value or software as a service. However, this is not what the program is about. The sweet spot of acquiring companies is more in the boring end of things. So you want to have a company which is relatively inexpensive, in addition to these potential black swan effects of the market in general. And you might also want to push down the price with these levers, which discount the price further. Illiquidity, no control, lack of governance, and value leakage, and the other measures. So if you do this right, you can have the possibility of getting into the business at the low point, at the discount, and then you can exit in the more moderate times with utilizing the premiums available when the market recovers. But just as a reminder, if you're looking to do this program to buy the next Supercell, this is probably not for you. And as an example, how people value companies, they look at the enterprise value over EBITDA. This is velaton arvo, käyttökate multiple, which means that how many times the value of the acquired business is a multiple of your current cash flow. And as we can see in this picture, in the engineering sector, of big blue chip engineering companies in the Nordic area, the typical multiple has been something like 10 times or even over it, and now it has collapsed here in the current environment. And this is quite important because this determines your entry point. If you enter at the low multiple and exit in the high multiple, that's good. If you do otherwise, then you have to, of course, improve the profitability to fight against the sort of the dropping multiple. So it's a good time to do deals probably pretty soon. Of course, if the market keeps going down, then that's still the bad timing, but we don't know really. And here's the data. As a part of this program, you would be looking at the numbers like this. On the engineering sector, you would look at not only the relative valuation, but you would look at the sales growth of the sector, the profitability of the sector, and then you would look at the sort of a smaller and much smaller than this actually of the market, not the big ones. This is the enterprise value, and Atlas Copco has an enterprise value of 34 billion euros. So obviously this program is not looking at to buy Atlas Copco, and it's not even looking at to buy routers, but much smaller companies. I think Gautam, you mentioned that the sweet spot is something like a couple of million euros to 20 million euros, if that's right.
That's correct.
And then you look at these discounts, which I mentioned in the previous slide, to sort of enhance your entry point. Buy low, sell high. Okay, now we move to the negotiations. So this is a negotiation theory. My theory is that amateurs operate in sort of a narrow corridor of giving up. This would mean that you basically are too nice guy. You give up anything that the other guy does, and then if you are then a tough guy, you go for competition mode and try to sort of capture all value to yourself and leave nothing to the other poor guy. And then you might haggle and go something in the middle. And but that's bad. That's naive negotiation. A sort of master negotiator looks at this completely differently. You either do this classic win-win, so both parties win big, or, which is equally important, you do no deal and both look for a better deal elsewhere. Of course, it's from time to time appropriate to do these outcomes, but as a mindset, you sort of try to structure a mutually satisfactory deal, or then you're pretty quick to look for options outside the theater at the play. And as a sort of, if you're interested in how this is done on the exit market, there's a pretty good Finnish book, Exit, which is has 15 stories of how successful entrepreneurs have sold their companies to or listed them or otherwise exited. Incidentally, 3 of the deals are TransLink corporate finance deals, which are shown here, and also the both authors have actually exited their businesses, Bo LKV and the Pappila-Penkkala group with our help. Then if you look how a typical bad negotiation works, this is the sort of caricature of a negotiation and when you don't know how to negotiate. You first look at what to do before you enter the negotiation at the off the table. We call it dialogue planning phase. And you are aided positively, trust is here positive and distrust is negative. You are aided by your reputation and references. Hopefully you have good ones. They could be bad as well if you have a bad reputation. And then there's of course some kind of pre-meeting resistance because people don't know you necessarily before the meeting. You enter the negotiation without agenda. You somehow scrape to the deal. You start doing the transaction and you can see here it will go badly. And what happens is you do first impression, or you skip that altogether, you being rude. You try to then build a relationship and perhaps succeed to push the positive energy up. Then you perhaps go to this bargaining model I showed in the previous slide. And then you maybe have a high moment where the other parties misunderstand the agreement and think they have a good deal, but then that was all a fake. Then time is running out. That's quite important in negotiation. You have approaching panic, and you maybe want to do a deal, and then you have a pretty lousy deal. And once you do a lousy deal, you have a declined trust carry forward. You potentially ruin your reputation and references, and you start from a bad foot when you do the deal with that party again, or with the sort of close circle of people, because people do tell about these back experiences. So don't do this. Okay, what you should do then? You should first do a bit of a, like the previous slide, no agenda. That's bad. So do an agenda, then you should obviously allocate some time wisely. So you should look at what you're looking at here. If you take the ETA program goals here, you are probably looking to buy a company cheaply and buy a good one where you enjoy working. You look at what the other party is looking at. They maybe want to get cash or some other benefit, or get the good new owner. Then you look at this win-win deal, like if you can do the combined deals with where everybody wins. And then you do quite a lot of this, like if you have to walk away, what would be the new partner. But then this ETA program, you actually do a lot of this. So you create a lot of walk away options. You look at the many new partner options. So you sort of repeat this circle with the ETA. And from time to time you do this compromise as a deal. But often people don't do this, and the beauty of the ETA is you do create a lot of backup options, because you keep repeating this process with the many companies. Then a couple of concepts I'm going to talk about up later on this presentation. We define 4 levers of negotiation. They are power, analytics, interaction, and principles. And here we define them in the form of splitting the pie in the context. So if this is your pie or cake, you have to split it, like who gets the benefit, added value of the deal. Hopefully you'll get more of it. And this is, you use power tricks and negotiation handles to achieve this. Then you have the analytical skills. You bake a bigger pie. You add elements to the deal, which are not obvious if you're smart and clever. And once you have achieved this bigger pie, you deliver in negotiation. So the other party, even if they get a smaller pie, they feel good about it, because you are handling the social interactions well. And then of course the reputation follows all through this. So if you're just doing this mechanically and trying to sort of screw the other party, then you're not doing it right. So you have to have a consistent principles how you negotiate and how you build your reputation over time. So this cake baking business is for the long term, not just the one-off. And on these concepts, we have tons of these concepts in our book, and in a negotiation training, you'll get through this ETA. But if you pick a couple, there's quite a lot of power elements, but I'm not going to cover them here today. But you could use status ranges and archetypes in negotiation, and you can use indirect power and the direct power to get forced decisions and walk away. But here we're mostly talking about the analytics. So you have the time management is quite key, like how you handle the time element. I touched upon the price early on, but there's a whole lot of stuff on the game theory and how to sort of find the best value in the deal. Then the interaction, I'm going to talk a bit more about that. So how you deliver your messages is done through a process called signaling and sharing the information. And then what's very, very important is the negotiation team composition. And with the ETA, you're going to get the benefit of the team, because we will be coaching you in this program. And then these principles in the long term, you need to have a reputation and trust and ethics and even the algorithms, how you do things in the clever way. Okay, so if you look at the signaling, so if you have to sort of get in a negotiation, you have to acquire information and you have to deliver information to the other party. So if you use the analogy of Texas Hold'em. You have 5 open cards eventually, and then you have 2 rivers here, and it's nice that they are aces, so you maybe win this one. But then there was an American, this is a foreign minister, I think, Donald Rumsfeld, and he had this fantastically misunderstood saying of the known unknowns, unknown unknowns, and basically that's actually very smart speech he had. So when you try to figure information, there are things you know that you know, your basic facts. There are things you know that you don't know. And then there are this black swan territory, the unknown unknowns, things you don't even know that you don't know them. And if you can uncover these black swan type of informations, then that can be hugely powerful. They can be like a key negotiation levers. So if you know, for example, if you're trying to buy a company and then you, through method or through luck, you learn that then there is a certain need for them to sell within a month, the business. And it's not obvious to everybody. This is there's this kind of time pressure. Then that's an example of a black swan event which you can use to your advantage. So, but then you signal the sort of open cards in this ETA program. You would say, be pretty open about that you want to acquire a company. You want a good one which grows and is profitable and can disrupt the competition. And you want to partner for a long term. So it's perfectly all right to openly talk about this. What you don't want to do, let's say this company is in the lovely city of Pori, but your family is in Helsinki, so you don't want to move to Pori. You shouldn't be rude and tell that doesn't going to help anybody. Then if this is a really terrific company, you shouldn't necessarily say that this is like the best of my options. And let's say that you have wasted your time in this wonderful program and used your 1 year of doing nothing, and you have 3 months left, then you should maybe tell that you have a time pressure of your own. But some people do this much more aggressively, and just to give it to 2 guys who do this in extreme. Nalle Wahlroos sold his bank for the Danish guys, Danske Bank, by signaling that he wants to sell it for over 3.5 billion, and he got 4.1 billion just by saying that this is his walkaway price. Elon Musk famously tweeted why he was high or something, that Tesla is worth $420 per share, and he has funding secured. For his arrogance, he was kicked out as a chairman and fined. But you can in extreme end do this even with the public listed companies, which these both were. So if you are really powerful guy, you can play outside this book. Sometimes it fails. And how to get the information? Actually, the trick is not to be a smart know-it-all. This, I don't know if anybody except like middle-aged guys like me know who this guy is, but it's Mr. Colombo and Peter Falk. And Colombo was a popular TV series back in ages ago, and the tactic of this detective was to play a really stupid guy who just had a last question which completely nailed the criminal in the show. So to get the information, it's very good to actually ask questions and say that you don't actually understand this business and you would appreciate any information they can give, and that's often actually true.
Hello there, my name is Sami Miettinen, and this was the excerpt from True North Search ETA program, where I described, together with my hosts Gautam Basu and Mikko Järvinen, a number of topics on acquisition process. I will do a follow-up podcast which will cover such things as team tactics, the optimal arc of negotiation, and how to close the deal. I will also answer a number of audience questions. If you have been listening to this, I would strongly recommend you will subscribe to my YouTube channel, Sami Miettinen, neuvottelija, or search negotiator. Thank you.